Folks, welcome. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. It's fantastic to be here with you, and certainly welcome to this session. It's a real privilege to be here, and I'd certainly like to thank Simran, Kankan, and the rest of the team to in relation to putting this event together. Um, Today, I'm going to share a few slides with you and tell a few stories and share some techniques and strategies. I will provide some tools and techniques for you, and also some ideas and philosophies around leadership and management. I will start sharing those PowerPoint slides shortly. Um, we do have the option for you to engage in questions and answers, so we'll have a workshop at the end of the presentation today where we can engage in some Q&A or questions and answers, if you will, or discussions, and we can work through some issues there. I hope you're all fit and well and ready to, I guess, take some information in, and not only information, but hopefully you get some inspiration from what I'm going to share and some of the ideas, again, philosophies and tools. Hopefully you'll get motivated and in keen to do something. Something I always like to do in these presentations is ask you up front a couple of things. Really, is I'd really like you to make a commitment with yourself with tonight that you're going to take at least one thing that we talk about tonight and implement it into your life. And it you might get a spark of inspiration or an idea that may have come from a previous lecturer, teacher, speaker, author, whatever it is. Make a commitment that you're going to implement at least one idea, suggestion, thought after tonight's presentation, because tonight is all about helping you become a better person. And I say that very deliberately, to become a better person before a better manager or leader, because yeah, before we can become good leaders and managers, we need to be good people, if you will. So lots to talk about, lots to think about tonight. So please make that commitment. I'd also uh, like to ask, and I think it's one of our poll questions, Simran, if I may, is get a bit of an indication of where people are from. So if you can put in the chat where you're from, that'd be fantastic. So the team at Health Ovations and IHNA have worked hard to put this presentation together. So welcome. And as we've mentioned in the introduction comments, the theme of tonight is about leadership and management. So mentioned before, there'll be some how-to tools and techniques. So there will be some direct strategies that you can take away and implement straight away. And as I mentioned before, make a commitment to put at least one idea into implementation. In other words, take action, and that is a leadership trait. That's point number one: is take action. Be assertive with taking action. Also tonight, I'd implore you to take notes of what we're talking about today. So it's always handy to have a pen and a notepad with you and take some notes as we go through some of the content. A bit of context and a bit of background about myself, folks. I've grown up here in Melbourne, Australia, where I currently am tonight. It's just gone 7 p.m. here on East Coast Melbourne, East Coast Australia, I should say. And so, give you a bit of context. I grew up here in Melbourne. There's a photo of myself with my family, some of my siblings, and growing up in Melbourne with not a great deal of aspirations to do very well in life. I mean, that photo there is when I was a small boy. But work represented a bit of a necessary evil, something that I needed to do. So Education and work was not a real motivation of mine when I was a young boy, a teenager, and indeed a young adult. The the impetus for and the motivational drive was a couple of personal tragedies. As a young adult, I decided to go back to night school, finish school, because my teachers suggested, Kevin, you're just not smart enough to finish school. You'll never amount to anything really in life. Go and work in a factory. And being young and immature and not very knowledgeable, I took this on board and certainly didn't succeed very well at school. And I took the teacher's advice and left school very early and worked in a factory. It soon became evident that factory work was pretty bad, to say the least. It was extremely challenging and awful. So, you know, working in extremely cold conditions, hot conditions, dusty, dirty, and feeling pretty miserable about not only work, but myself. And so over the years, I took myself back to night school, finished my secondary school, went on to university, completed a master's degree in business administration, and also started to change my work. Got out of that awful job and got into more growth type of jobs. When I say growth, I mean opportunities for me to learn and develop and grow as an individual, as a person, and indeed as a leader. Uh, and a big part of that was having some self-belief and certainly determination. And having that family support behind me really helped, in reflection, really helped me able to reinvent oneself to be able to do that. I share that brief story with you, not so you stand up and say, oh, Kevin, it's fantastic. I'm certainly not alone. There's lots of success stories out there. However, I do share that story with you, how my personal journey in terms of how I went from a non-leader, if you will, to a leader, not only as a leading myself, but also in some of the jobs and careers that I've had, where I've had leadership positions, where I've managed staff, some other positions I've had where I didn't manage staff, but I had a significant leadership role. So the things we'll talk about tonight, this morning, will be coming from not only my personal experience, but also some of the many courses I've been on and part of my master's degree. And also, I'm a published author too, folks. So I thought I'd share that with you. So thank you. I'm married with two healthy, happy children, which is fantastic. Let's move on. So some of the key themes today, and we'll be talking about there's a spelling error there, the psychology of leadership, and being able to, some of the practical things we'll talk about tonight is the notion of uh, giving you some tools and techniques. So I mentioned it before. I will give you some really structured tools so you can implement some of these things fairly easy. So again, please take note. How to influence people with positive expectations of your organization, particularly in a hospital or medical setting. Executing onboarding is paramount, and getting it right is paramount to success, not only in the health industry, but also you as a manager and a leader. And please don't make any excuse for this. We are in the people business, full stop. We are in the people business, full stop. So reflecting on that, you as a leader, you are in the people's business. So if that's your business, then you need to, as Tom Peters says, give a damn. Really, really care about your people, because the people are your business. You are in the people business. So let's don't lose sight of that fact that yes, you might work in a dental clinic environment, a hospital ward, or administrative type of environment, but as a leader, as a manager, we are in the people business. The other key theme that will come out tonight too is the importance of training, not only from a compliance point of view, but also training in terms of people development and communication skills and problem solving, decision making, those sorts of things. So I've put their capital investment. I've got some data to share with you later on in the presentation. So folks, about the themes of today, yes, it's going to be some philosophies, psychology, and also some practical tools that we can use. So, and the overarching purpose of today is to develop and build your knowledge and skills, particularly in people and across the health sector, to really make a better you. I may have said it in the introduction comments that for you to be a better leader of people, you need to be leading yourself personally in a better way. So the psychology of leadership, and I do apologize for the typo there. And Warren Bennis talks about this in some of his books on leadership. Warren Bennis, a famous American author on leadership and management. Some of the key things around the psychology of leadership and why people will follow or take the lead from a leader. And there's people that we trust. People that we trust. Leaders also have a sense of courage. And as Tom Peters talks about in lots of his seminars, and that's an author, Tom Peters, and I'll share more about him a little bit later. MBWA is, and forgive me if you've heard this before, but it's management by walking around. So if you're in a leadership role, get away from the office, get away from the computer, and go and walk amongst what's happening in your operations, in your hospital ward. Have a good knowledge base. Talking about they are skilled and they're knowledgeable in their technical field. And when I say technical field, I'm not necessarily talking about technology per se, but their expertise may lie in medical expertise, a certain discipline in medicine they might have expertise in, or a body of knowledge in law, medical law or general law, or in accountancy. So technical knowledge or technical skills may apply to some of those attributes that we can have. And leaders are passionate and enthusiastic about their organization, their industry, and their people. They're passionate. They love it. Folks, a couple of examples. I was rather horrified in recent times. Well, this is going back a few years, and it relates to the health industry, where there's an organisation here in Australia that provides home nursing services, where nurses would travel in cars to people's homes and provide nursing care in people's homes. So this organisation, quite widespread and quite a major player in that particular service providing service. And what was interesting in terms of trust, one of the senior managers of this organisation, District Nursing, they were travelling interstate. So they travelled in their car out to Melbourne Airport, which is a pretty normal thing to do. This senior manager gets out to Melbourne Airport, parks the car, and is walking across to the terminal and notices one of the company cars, because the company cars are branded, and notice one of the cars sitting there in the airport. And this manager was a bit concerned. Why one of their cars parked at the car park at Melbourne Airport. So this manager gets on the phone, telephones headquarters, and in a very abrupt and rude manner rings up and says, "Who owns this car?" And she'd recorded the registration number and the vehicle number. "Who owns this car? Yada yada. It's parked out at Melbourne Airport. What's going on?" In a sense of lack of trust of, what's going on, not and and people at headquarters made some inquiries and found out the car was parked out at Melbourne Airport because it was there because one of the other managers had left it there to go interstate to attend a conference, go to another city in Australia. And so the car was parked there for quite legitimate work reasons. But the question is, does that, when you get the senior managers ringing up headquarters in an abrupt, rude manner, asking about why one of their vehicles is parked out at Melbourne Airport car park. Now, to me, that rings bells of a lack of trust in the people that work in this organisation. So leaders have got to be able to be trusted. Now, these sorts of little examples can filter through the whole organisation. And this particular one certainly did. And, once you accumulate a number of these situations and these behavioural patterns from some of the leaders and managers, it can have a diminished view in terms of the culture and trust amongst the leaders of the organisation. So I share that pessimistic, sort of a negative story, but in reverse, leaders need to be have a sense of trust. If people share something with you that is confidential, please keep it confidential and don't share it. So some key points there in leadership: trust, courage, management by walking around, have that self-belief and that self-image that you are an effective leader. Develop your knowledge and skills, and be passionate and enthusiastic about what you're doing. Also, the open to be, there we go, self-belief and self-image, open to learn, be willing to be corrected, be willing to think your previous perceptions, your previous hunches, your previous understandings may not be correct. They might be partially correct, but be open to learn. So leaders have that characteristic, almost a playful, childlike attribute of being open to learn and experiment and play with things in that sense. Set personal and professional goals. So have those, whether it's workplace goals, and in fact, please don't limit your goals just to workplace. We need to have a work-life balance of family, health and well-being, spiritual, religion, family, social, and obviously financial, economic, and career type goals. So look at setting some goals across those parameters, because we want to develop a well-rounded, healthy individual. Have a future vision for not only your organisation but also yourself, where you see yourself in 2, 5, and 10 years from now. Where do you see yourself? So if somebody was to ask you, "Hey Peter, where do you see yourself working in 5 years from now?" You'd want to tell me what your future is, what it looks like. Learn from mistakes, develop mentors and coaches, and mentors and coaches don't necessarily need to be people although it can be ideally if coaches are people you can work with, but mentors can be somebody that inspires you, and they might be on the other side of the world. You might read their books or see them, or they might have sometime passed and so on. So mentors and coaches are important for leadership. And the adage of read, read, and then read some more. Develop that vocabulary, improve your vocabulary. All leaders have a vast understanding of the language and can draw from their vocabulary to articulate what they want and need to explain or influence or demonstrate or lead. So nothing substitutes from a person that reads and embellishes the English language or whatever language that you are working amongst. I suggest most of you are looking at the English language, but please forgive me if you're from a country, and I understand people from all over the world, including Zimbabwe, Nigeria. I think we've got Germans, Indians, and New Zealand people amongst the participants today. So welcome everybody. So yes, if read and expand that vocabulary. A couple of the books, and I've mentioned this person before, is Tom Peters on leadership. So there's a book there he published several years ago, and the book's titled In Search of Excellence. Yes, the book is dated in terms of reference to some of the companies that are either have been bought out or no longer existing. Some of the technology may be a little bit old. However, some of the philosophies and ideas are certainly not dated. The other book that part of my research today was Extreme Humanism, another book by Tom Peters. I'd highly suggest and recommend that you, part of your development is to get access to some of these books. I did mention a book before by Warren Bennis on becoming a leader. So any of you that have studied management or leadership would have probably come across some of these authors before. So now let's have a look at where we're going in terms of leadership and business success. And part of that story, and it is part of that story, is that we need to be hiring the best people or the most suitable people for the particular roles and skills that we need to fill. And hiring is a skill, and a skill that is often, particularly in an Australian context, that is underappreciated and is not considered very important. However, as a lot of you are probably aware, that once you get some people in a workplace that don't quite fit or don't quite have the necessary skills and knowledge base to carry out their job, it can be problematic from a team working point of view, and can make the roles of leaders and managers very challenging to be successful, to say the least. So hiring the best people is often good. So, and we'll talk about this in a little bit more detail. So now, without sounding too obvious, and I do apologize, I often get a bit concerned with these seminars that I'm thinking to myself, I'm not necessarily going to be sharing anything absolutely brand new. And it's somewhat concerning that I do a lot of these seminars and I share a lot of these things, and people think that's good. So please forgive me if this seems a little bit elementary or a bit common sense, but business is often about common sense. So hiring people for the suitable jobs, if you're hiring people that are going to be working in administration, ensure that you ask the relevant questions that is pertinent to that particular role. Same with how they deal with customers. And customer service questions don't necessarily have to apply to a person working in a call center or in a retail setting. Yeah, customer service. Remember, 101 in business, customer service. Not only we have external customers, and yes, that applies to a retail setting and call center environments, but it also relates to internal customers. Working in a large hospital, you've got many internal customers. You've got other parts of the business, you've got all the clinical care, lots and lots of other areas of the business where the business, and I'll call it the business, the organization, if you will, can't run successfully if people are not supporting each other. So customer service paramount in terms of an internal teamwork. Ask questions about how people function and work within a team, communication, negotiation skills, problem solving, decision making. All these foundation skills, if you will, and are important for you as a leader and a manager to to get the right type of people. And sure, during the process, you might not be able to mark off 100% with all those things. However, you'll get a sense of, okay, where this person is at, and if the candidate is successful with the role, you presumably put a development plan together to help them bridge those gaps. The other key thing is that the notion of willing to grow as a person and as a professional, and to be flexible. So some of the key things there. So please take some notes there as we move forward. So hiring people, and I'm going to spend some time on this hiring because it is a tactical skill that a good leader needs to really get their head on around. Now, if your organisation is not up to date with recruitment processes, then the question is why not? Because it needs to be seriously. So when hiring people, the usual process is that an advertisement will go out into the general public, usually on one of these online platforms such as Seek and the many others, or it might be internally advertised through their intranet. As a screening, go through the resumes, ensure that compliance, any of the compliance issues are dealt with early on in terms of, it might be a legal compliance, that the individual be a registered nurse or whatever the compliance be. So make sure those things are ticked off and ensure that the position descriptions and job profiles are up to date in terms of all those things from compliance and also the other terms and conditions of employment in whatever country that you're in. You'll have to, depending on what country you are in, this will differ from country to country, I'd assume. So in Australia, it is quite a complex area in terms of employment law and industrial relations here in Australia. It's quite complex. The specialised technical skills and knowledge required in that particular area. Typically, human resources will look after this function, and they will have or should have the required knowledge and skills to support the business in that function. So here's a to-do for you, and I've got a few of these to-dos through the session. Review and update all your job profiles and job descriptions. Also, the notion of a selection criteria. When selecting good people, you'll have what's called what can be referred to as a selection criteria. In other words, a list of ideal attributes, skills, knowledge, experience, education that the individual possesses. And based on that selection criteria, you can manage a good recruitment process. Through this process also of looking at recruiting good people is this notion of STAR, and I'd like you to take some notes here. The STAR, and the S stands for situation. I'll pause there for you to write that down. So S for situation, T for task, A for action, and the R is for results. So let me give you an example of what I'm talking about here when I'm talking about these this when interviewing people or discussing with people in terms of finding a suitable candidate, we as leaders and managers, in particularly in the health sector, we need to couch our questions around finding the stars. Let me give you an example. So if you are recruiting an RN, a registered nurse, for your facility, and they've applied for the job, they've provided their CV or resume, and you've gone through the process and you're at the interview stage now. So one of the questions you could ask the nurse is, can you tell me, can you give me an example? It's a great way to start a question. Can you give me an example of, can you give me an example of dealing with a problematic patient or problematic client? Now, a fairly generic, good question that a recruiter would ask a candidate. Now, when we're looking for the stars, ideally the candidate would respond with providing you with a situation. So the situation was that the individual was very upset and concerned that the patient was quite old. The patient was in her 90s and quite frail and concerned about what was going on. The previous nurse had been rude and dismissive of this patient. And so you articulate the situation, if you will. What was the scenario? So the situation was the patient was very nervous and rude and concerned about the health care that she was getting. So that's the situation. So the task that you engaged in was that you sat down with the patient patiently and asked her a couple of questions about what was happening, how she's feeling, uh, family members, and what sort of medication and how often people were seeing a doctors and nurses and so forth. So asking her those questions. So that was some of the tasks that the candidate was saying that she was doing, and listening very carefully to what the patient had 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 to say. So the tasks and the actions were asking questions and listening to what the patient had to say. And as a result of that 20-minute conversation, the patient felt more relaxed and more calm and was more open to being to receiving some health care from the nurse and less likely to complain. And that's often been a case. So there's a simple example about a, a a nurse applying for a job as a nurse in another organisation, and the candidate's asking, can you give me an example where you've had a challenging patient? So ideally the nurse would explain those that situation and the task and the action and the outcome or the result of that in that sort of manner. Often candidates don't know. Most of them will say something like, oh, let me go through the question again. Can you give me an example of where you had to deal with a patient that wasn't happy? Yeah, I asked a few questions and yeah, we got it sorted out and now she's happy. Most people will respond in some sort of way like that, which is fine in some sense. However, you as a recruiter want to make sure this person has got the, if you will, the characteristics that care, that respect, have got the ability to, let me put it bluntly, have got the ability to shut up and listen fully. They've got some of these attributes and skills. This is where the candidates are likely to expose that to you as the leader and the recruiter in these situations. So I want you to think about this star notion. Now, I'm not the first one to talk about this. Has been around for some time. So any of you that are in a situation where you are recruiting people, and let's put it in reverse, if you are looking for a job, you can also work this in your favor too as a job hunter. So there's lots of material out there in the libraries and journals, on the internet, obviously, as well. So please have a think about it. It's a very powerful means of communicating as a leader. Now, in a leadership role, you may not always get the full example. So please jump in when the candidate starts talking to you about a situation. They often will go from the situation right through to the results or the outcome. But stop them and say, well, how did you go about doing that? What happened? Tell me more about this. So see some of the questions to get the candidate to expand further on the situation. And when they start to expand, you'll get a sense of how knowledgeable they are, how skillful they are in terms of doing the core fundamentals of the job. It's a great way to see somebody's skills and their gaps in terms of their knowledge and skills to do. So so also through the process, another leadership trait is take the candidates on a tour of the facility and start an informal conversation. So a lot of people, particularly in a Western point of view, is once they leave the interview room, they relax and can sometimes let their guard down. And by taking people on a bit of a walking tour, as I said, tour to the facility, and start an informal conversation about some of their views, opinions on sport, culture, food, books, movies, geography, travel. They just probably avoid talking about politics and avoid talking about religion, but virtually every other topic. And be very deliberate about this. Be very deliberate about starting an informal discussion, and you'll get some insight into the person. The other attribute of leadership is share the decision process with your team members. So in other words, the candidates introduce the candidate to the team members and let them get a feel for how this person is. Your team members, and there's a spelling error, will be a really good indicator of how well this person will fit into the team. So you really need to avoid any bad eggs coming in. Please forgive me these. I thought I fixed these spelling errors, but however, I do apologise. At least keep reading it. So make sure they fit into the team, and that's paramount, particularly in a health setting where so many people need to work in a tight team. I'm rather struck when I visit some of these medical centres. Some of the work environments can be quite close knitting. In other words, you might have 4 or 5 people working in a relatively small space, and they're sharing work desks, they're sharing computers, and it's really important that these people uh, work well together. I'm not saying they become best friends, but they work collaboratively with each other and work well. Because if you get a bad egg there, it can be absolutely toxic and poisonous amongst the other people. So be very careful. All right, hiring. So hire people that are nice. And this is going to sound ridiculous, some of these words. Nice, people that are empathetic, people that are courteous, People are patient. People that have got the ability to listen. People that are warm. People that care. People that smile and have a positive disposition about them. Listen to words like please and thank you. Maybe some community memberships and community involvement. And look for those notions of people that are looking to become better people. Again, be careful of the well-spoken, fast-talking people that may come across initially as really good. Just be careful. I mean, sometimes they are very good, but just be careful. Um, all right, I love this quote. This quote comes from Brian Tracy in his book, The Psychology of Achievement. Is develop the skill of question skillfully and listen carefully. Let me say that again, and I hope you make a note of it. Question skillfully and listen carefully. This might sound fairly basic, however, well-timed, well-structured questions can have a huge influence on your engagement with other people. And again, remember I said we are in the people business, and one of the greatest cravings we have as human beings is to be respected and listened to, and listen carefully. Listening carefully will help you continue to ask pertinent and relevant questions also. So question skillfully and listen carefully. When it comes to reference checks, ask some of the questions where they ask the references about the candidates' areas of further development. What areas do they need to make improvements in? Tell me about their past performance, particularly in relation to tardiness and commitment and so forth. All right, so to do, whenever people leave, as a leader, look at making an exit interview. Find out why people are leaving. You get some fantastic insight into what's going on in your business when people have, if you will, have let their guard down. They've decided, they've made that psychological decision to vacate and leave the business, leave the facility, leave the hospital, and ask them for the honest, candid truth about why. And it might be hard for you to listen, particularly if you're really enthusiastic and passionate about your industry and your organization, where you hear people saying some pretty toxic things potentially. Sometimes people might say that's been good. They're just moving interstate. They might be leaving for some, might not want to leave for various reasons. And depending on the labour market demands at that particular time, you do have the option to leave the door open. And when I say leave the door open, I mean leave the door open for possible future engagement with the individual. Perhaps they might look at coming back in another 12 months or 2 years. And if that suits you and the business, then you could certainly explore that option. Now, before I talked in some of the introduction comments, and I know we're jumping around a bit here, folks, but some of the data in terms of training and education, some of the data when it comes to training and education in organisations, I want to spend a little time now talking about internal training and education, because it is paramount for not only from a people in the people's business, but also from an organizational development point of view, and a whole lot of reasons. I'll go through them in a minute. Tom Peters, in his book Extreme Humanism, goes through some data and talks about this, and this comes from an American context, which probably would resonate pretty closely, I'd suggest, with Australia anyway. I can't speak for other parts of the world, but certainly here in Australia would probably be fairly consistent with. And it's rather shocking, particularly when we think about training individuals. We Think about industries such as travel and the airline industry, for one. Being an airline pilot, the amount of training that these individuals go through to keep their skills up to date and sharp and on track. These organisations, Qantas Airlines, have got a huge training facility in Sydney and other parts of Australia where they invest literally millions of dollars ensuring that their pilots and their cabin crew are trained and updated. They have flight simulators that cost a small fortune to not only purchase but to operate. And so there's almost no limit of expense that's spared to ensure that these people are properly trained to do their job and to do their job well. Think about things like the military, uh, the Army, the Navy, the Air Force, learning all the various different skills they have to do, but not only the tactical notion of operating a gun or something, but all the other skills and attributes. So training is so paramount for some of these industries. And it is rather shocking when we have a look at this sort of slide, and this according to Tom Peters, is 5 out of 10 CEOs consider training to be an expense rather than an investment. That's 5 out of 10 don't see training as an opportunity. They see it as an expense. No, damn training. We've got to spend some money on training rather than investing in training. 5 out of 10 CEOs sees training as a necessary evil. No, they've got to do it. It's a compliance sort of training. So it's a necessary. So we've got to do it because the government tells us to do it. So it's sort of a necessary evil to stay in business. 5 out of 10 CEOs consider training as a defense rather than an offense. So again, it has that similar theme. Necessary evil. It's an expense rather than an investment. The other staggering information that Tom Peters has put here: 8 out of 10 CEOs see a typical 45-minute tour de mission of the commerce. In other words, a 45-minute talk about your business would not so much even mention training and development in their mission, the conference of the organisation. So that's pretty frightening. Now, I mentioned before, this data has come from the United States. I'd suggest, from my experience, it's pretty consistent with what I've seen here in Australia, which is a real shame. And the heading there is training needs to be a capital investment rather than a necessary evil. So some of the benefits in terms of good, let me underline the word good training. It reduces staff turnover. Now, staff turnover is a very expensive and costly exercise. It takes a long time and it costs a lot of money. Not only the process of doing, but once you got it on board, get the person inducted, onboarded, and it can take 6 to 12 months before a person becomes fully functional and productive. So reduces that staff turnover. People feel valued and will demonstrate loyalty. So people that are receiving good quality training on a regular basis will feel that they are valued by the organisation and subsequently be more loyal to the organisation. People are more likely to go the extra mile, come in a little bit earlier, stay a little bit later, do a little bit of work on the weekend when they're not working. When people are receiving good training, this is some of the things they'll do. Save time and money in attracting, recruiting, and inducting new staff members, team members. Indeed, that very much resonates with reducing staff turnovers. Creates a workforce of choice. Now, what's really interesting here is, particularly in the current environment, where the job market is very much in favour of people looking for work. So if you are looking to come to Australia, there's so much work opportunity here. It's just crazy. So in organisations that provide good quality training, the word will get out that this organisation is good, and people will be attracted to that particular organisation. So good for you as a leader, you'll have the option to choose amongst a lot more candidates than if your organisation had a poor reputation. More engagement with team members, in other words, creating a more positive and better and more productive work environment, and create a sense of culture and teamwork across the organisation. Also reduces those notions of sick leave, which can be problematic, particularly in some of the industries where they're short-staffed, and the health sector is certainly short-staffed right across that sector. Everything from your large hospitals to your small clinics, aged care, special needs, pathology, it is all stretching for staff. So when we can reduce sick leave, then that can be a good thing. Okay. I mentioned about some of the training, how important it is, and from a healthcare point of view, can you imagine? Now, I talked about airline pilots and military people. That'd be and surgeons and doctors certainly go through a lot of training and education to develop, and dentists to develop their skills and so forth. So people even in administrative roles and in support roles also need to have just ongoing training and support to support their skills and develop their skills further. Training soft skills, top-notch training that you can get excited about, really get excited. You as the leader and the manager need to get excited about training. And we're talking soft skills, so communication skills, self-awareness and emotional intelligence type of training. And it's ongoing. It's not, let's run a communication skills training today and let's see how it goes in 2 years, we might do another. No, it needs to be ongoing, continuous development. Negotiation, customer service, and the list goes on. Provide these skills and this training for your staff and you'll reap the benefits. Team building, problem solving, conflict resolution, the list goes on. And this training needs to be top notch. It's not just somebody in HR, an administration person in HR doing some of this training. You need to invest and get some good quality presenters, lecturers, support people to facilitate some of this great content. So top-notch training in terms of soft skills. And training's not always around the notion of sitting in a training room or classroom. It's sure it can be formal education, degrees, qualifications. Our college here certainly provide lots of opportunity for formal qualifications, certificate levels and diploma level qualifications. It could form in-house courses, so courses that are managed and coordinated in-house. So a particular hospital might run a particular course on certain policies and procedures they might have just for that particular hospital. External courses, staff, leaders, managers can go off and do, team leaders can go off and do a course at an external provider. It could be a local college, could be a local university that are doing short courses. Internal training could involve, internal, getting people, experts from inside the organisation to provide some training in a workshop environment. Training and education can come in the form of mentoring and coaching. Some of the larger clinics and hospitals have a professional development library where people can go and read and study, see some of the latest journals and publications in that industry. And you could use a buddy system where match people up to complement their skills and also help them build new skills. And and also create a positive sense of teamwork. So training can come in all those various forms. I like this quote. It is from Christy Watson, who was a nurse. What I thought nursing involved when I started, which was chemistry, biology, physics, pharmacology, and autonomy, and what I now know to be truth about nursing is philosophy, psychology, art, ethics, and politics. Now, isn't that interesting? Isn't that interesting? So all those technical skills and knowledge that Christy thought was paramount in nursing really got down to the people, listening, and the psychology of interacting with people. I like that there. So to do, attend all training sessions. You as the manager, you as the leader, attend all training sessions with your team members and support them through that. Get excited about it. Really get excited. You attending, you as the leader, if you attend, this will influence everybody else in the room. Remember, you as a leader are effectively on show. So you need to demonstrate your passion and your enthusiasm for the organisation, your industry, and what you're doing in that training. Now, Richard Branson, you might be familiar with that name. Quoted, I love this, train people well enough so they can leave. Treat them well enough so they don't want to. Now that is so profound. I mean, I've been talking over the last few slides about all this training and going to the expense and, what are you talking about, Kevin? All this training, communication skills this and problem solving that. They just got to get on and do the job. And when they do get good, they're just going to go and get another job somewhere else. And yes, they may. But as Richard Branson said, treat them well enough so they don't want to leave. And that's extremely profound, I think. And I think that's something you need to give some consideration to, particularly in management and leadership. Train people well enough so they can leave. Treat them well enough so they don't want to. Richard Branson. Remember, leadership is a transfer of positive of energy and enthusiasm. You're on show. So from a scale of 1 to 10, where do you see yourself in terms of your positive energy? Are you down low around the 20% or up higher? And we're running out of time vastly. I'm sorry, we're going over time here. Take an honest look at how you treat your people. How many times a day do you smile with people? What percentage of the time do you invest in listening to people? Or are you always in a rush? How many times a day do you say good work, well done, or thank you? Some of these phrases. How many emails or texts do you send a day saying thank you? There's some food for thought there, guys. So have a think about these, and if you need to make some modifications, do that. A quote by Dale Carnegie: "The deepest principle in human nature is the craving to be appreciated." Dale Carnegie's book, How to Win Friends and Influence People. So the deepest principle in human nature is the craving to be appreciated. So a simple thank you, yes please, can go a long way, a long way. And sadly, a lot of managers and leaders do not do it. And if they do it, they could do it more. Another quote is, how you treat your people is how your people will treat your clients, patients, and customers, and each other. So the way you treat people is going to directly be mirrored in them engaging with your patients, clients, and each other. This is an interesting quote. When I was at medical school, I spent hundreds of hours looking into a microscope, a skill I never needed to know or even use. Yet I didn't have a single class that taught me communication or teamwork skills, something that I need every day I walk into the hospital. That's interesting. Soft skills, as Tom Peters often says, are paramount. So those communication skills, team working skills are absolutely paramount. So folks, in summing up, we've talked about a number of things tonight. I know I've jumped a little bit from topic to topic. I hope you've taken some notes, but essentially we've talked about some of the psychology and given you some skills, particularly around recruitment of good people. We talked about the stars. We also looked at the notion of training and the importance of training, not only technical skills and compliance matters, but also soft skills and human interaction skills. So in closing, I want to finish off with some of these ideas, if you will. Read something inspirational and or educational each day. Develop your vocabulary. Learn a word each day, a new word. Invest at least 2% of your annual income into self-improvement, whether that is money spent for professional group memberships, subscriptions, courses, books, seminars, conferences. The other one, keep fit and healthy. I do like this quote. I don't know who the author is. One should eat to live and not live to eat. So look after ourselves from a health point of view and be true to your values. Treat others how you would like them to treat you. Folks, I'd really like to thank you for your participation today. And I think we can open it up for question and answer today. But look, thanks for listening to me. I know this is a challenge doing it online. It's often a little bit easier in the live seminars where we can engage with one another a little bit easier. But thanks, folks.